All right, it looks like we're live here. So, John Carvalho, welcome to the Magic Internet Money Podcast. It's
Hey,
been a
thanks for
long
having
time
me.
coming, man.
Yeah, I know we've known each other not very, very closely, but for a long time.
In the trenches during the block size wars together. I think I seen you down one of the trenches a couple
Yeah,
times.
yeah. Taking some fire.
Um, and then I'm interested in peer-to-peer technologies, not just say Bitcoin as a store of value or a method of exchange, but actually using Bitcoin and decentralized applications for other use cases. So typically, like Bitcoiners, I think what happened was during the block size wars, we had to fight with people attacking us with Bitcoin's not good for method of exchange. So therefore it's broken. So a lot of Bitcoiners, we kind of like sacrificed some use cases to fight the decentralization war. And I still think there's some remnants of that left over where, Blockstream doesn't get enough credit and using Bitcoin as a payment method doesn't get enough credit, and building applications that interact with Bitcoin for like peer-to-peer apps. That doesn't get enough credit either because the shitcoin sort of industry has totally co-opted these different use cases. And I'm so glad to see people like you and Jack Dorsey and others that are building legitimate decentralized application technology that uses protocols that doesn't need to like bolt onto a token or bolt a token onto it or even talk to a blockchain, or it's not built on a blockchain at all in some cases. So I'm super glad to see that you took this on. So I'm kind of like fanboying a little bit here too much. So why don't I let you talk to people? Say, well, what are you doing with Synonym? What is it? What are you guys
Well,
building?
just to kind of recap a little bit, you're saying um, I'm a very critical person. Anybody that knows me knows this, and I reflect that on myself, and I reflect that on Bitcoin too. And so I think that process has allowed me to kind of be in what some people might call a toxic or extreme, Bitcoin maximalist position, to the point where I'm pretty happy to be one of the few people and companies focusing on like strictly thinking that Bitcoin, like the blockchain, is like literally only for Bitcoin and there is no other use case. And it's really been really exciting and fun to figure out how to do all these things that people think are necessary or interesting for the web or for economic finance, whatever, to see how you could do these things without a blockchain at all. And then the learning and seeing that, you know what, actually you can, and they're usually, if not always, better when you don't use a blockchain, which was all the stuff we joked about back in like the Bitcoin uncensored days. Like it's just like, don't use a blockchain for that. It's a really inefficient database, like don't do that. So that kind of is a segue, I guess, to talking about Synonym, where that is one of our design principles. And if you go to our website, you'll see that we actually list our design principles, and we use these as rules for how we make decisions about what to build, how we build it, and which dependencies to include in our designs. And so we include Bitcoin, we include Lightning, we include hypercore and slash tags, and that's about it. And a lot of the other things we do use are based on those things anyway. Like we can talk about pair credit if you want as well. And so those dependencies and those things allow us to kind of build our vision of what we think post hyper Bitcoinization would look like. And so Synonym's goal is basically to have at least one reference ecosystem that gives people everything that they would actually need at minimum to be able to have a alternative society, alternative economy, alternative Bitcoin future. So that's a
So
summary. But yeah, we have various products that we specifically are making and have already shipped and partially shipped and that kind of thing.
So I think like it would be good to talk about it from first principles, I guess, of like from the user's perspective of what kind of application would you see people using in a decentralized way? Like what are you building these frameworks for, and what would it be, like chat apps or peer-to-peer lending
Absolutely
apps,
everything.
or like what do you think is going to be used by people?
We won't build absolutely everything, but I think the things I mentioned are all you need to do absolutely everything. What we have built is, we have Blocktank, which is our LSP service, which is just a way of, both monetizing and showing how you can make Lightning more reliable and easier to use, and something that you can help businesses onboard onto, merchants, something that you can do to make wallets much more usable, and kind of we're trying to keep that part of the Lightning industry healthy. And so we have like an LSP spec group for making specifications to make these things interoperable across different projects and that kind of thing. Blockchain, and I'll mention, all of our products each have their own website now, and so it's always the name of the product and then .to. So if you care about any of them, go to blocktank.to, etc. And then we have slash tags, which is sort of our answer to any of the kind of peer-to-peer web solutions that people might want to see happening, but also a primitive that we're going to be using to establish reputation and web of trust solutions. And this kind of is, in this vision where we think Bitcoin wins, we also think it dismantles a bunch of things like big banks, big tech, big state. And what do we replace whatever functions they may be providing at the moment with? And I think that slash tags also in the future is the answer to that side of things, where, how do we self-regulate, for example? Without government. And I think that reputation and webs of trust are a great way to do that. How do we accomplish something like search or publishing or communications without Google, without, Facebook, without Twitter? I think, slash tags, which also uses hypercore, is, part of that solution. And so you could kind of use it as a replacement for maybe what Web5 or Web3 is trying to do. But it's kind of, we have a bit different approach and a bit different philosophy about how we try to solve those problems. Slash tags is also slash tags.to if you want to learn more about it. We have an SDK that we've released for that and a bunch of different modules. Everything we do is open source, so you can find all of our products, including servers and clients and every aspect in our GitHub repo, which is github.org/synonymdev. And then we have BitKit, which we just put into beta, and people can join that beta by visiting bitkit.to. And BitKit is kind of our first expression of using this stack of technology. And so it's a mobile wallet that's meant to be your ultimate Bitcoin toolkit. So we're expanding on the idea of using an app that's a keychain for Bitcoin and making it a keychain for everything, owning your data, owning your public identity, your public profile, having your contacts list be interoperable with Bitcoin, and various, and also it shows primitives for using slash tags as a way to build decentralized applications.
Cool. And
more stuff planned, but that's all we have for now.
when is the pre-sale?
There's no pre-sale.
Wait, there's no tokens. Oh, I keep forgetting
No.
this is Bitcoin, not Ethereum. Right.
Yeah. We
So how do the VCs dump on plebs? How does that happen with slash tags?
I don't know. It's funny you say that, because there is kind of a joke or a spin-off topic of that, which is like, people really love scams. People really love these opportunities. And how do you get people? They say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Like, I can build you a new alternative economy, a new alternative society where you have total self-sovereignty, but how do I get you to use it? And this is one thing that maybe, if you bear with me, shitcoiners have a little bit right, and that the way they get their attention is with scamming, with gambling, with, maybe you'll get rich if you're lucky, or maybe you're stupid and I can, take advantage of your ignorance to get you over here and try our stuff.
Right.
That when you take the honest path, that part's missing. How do you get everybody over? And so,
I think I have an idea on that.
oh, I have some as well.
It's
Yeah.
a little tricky to do because you actually have to raise money and use marketing spend to incentivize people to come use your app. Like a lot of the stuff that happened in DeFi and Web3 was they just created money from nothing. They just printed their own token, gave themselves a bunch of it, pumped it with liquidity pools where they would just put honeypot liquidity pools up on the decentralized exchanges and liquidity, dApps. And then it was a free for all of like they're pumping the price up and all these users are coming to like use the apps and use the stuff to get these tokens, and they called it yield farming. And I mean, it's the same with Helium Network and all these things that there actually is some like interesting stuff happening in Web3, DeFi, things like that. The idea of having peer-to-peer decentralized exchange or peer-to-peer hotspots all over the world, like there is something there, but they always corrupt it with tokens. And yeah, it's like there is a little debate going on in Bitcoin circles of like, how do we get people to use decentralized apps on Bitcoin? Because typically we just take the higher road and think more long term, but that also means that less people are going to use it. So it is a
I
little bit
think
of
the most morally sound and practical approach, which is where we come from most for the most part, is that you solve problems that they have and you show them how they can
right.
do things they couldn't do before. So
Yeah,
you
that's a
give
good
them
way
new
to do it.
powers. Now that is still requiring a lot of education, and you have like migration problems, and you have plenty of adoption problems. You have business development problems. You have technology integration problems. There's a lot there. It's tons of work, but I think it's work worth doing. eh, as far as actually getting the kind of excitement of the style of shitcoins with scams and stuff, I don't have a solution for that, but I think I have some other ideas that are tapping into similar feelings of reward for people. Like for example, gamification is an
Right.
interesting area, and if you include gamification concepts on top of web of trust concepts or social media concepts, you might be able to get people like competing. In this
Right.
case, they're not competing for the promise of getting rich; they're competing for some other type of intangible win. But
Leaderboard position or something like
yeah,
that.
things like this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you
So
could
this
actually build like legitimate methods to earn sats into these things. Like if you're a very trusted person on this in this web of trust or whatever, maybe as a key signer for a multi-sig or something like that, you can earn a little fee
we,
for
we like to call that business. We
right.
like,
You built some
you can always provide
real
a
stuff.
product or a service. That's how I think of it. But yeah,
That's
yeah.
actually how DeFi started, and that's why, because I was following Ethereum DeFi pretty early back in 2019 because I was kind of interested in what they had done with Uniswap and these different like Curve and different liquidity pools and stuff, because they didn't have any tokens. There wasn't really like the ICO bubble popped. We went through 2 years of crazy bear market. Everybody realized these utility tokens were just garbage. And what emerged was actually some people that were kind of cypherpunk. Like the guy that built Uniswap did it as a protest fork. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the guy that built Uniswap, he saw that Bancor had done this massive ICO, raised tens of millions of dollars, and bolted a token onto this AMM. And he's like, screw that. I'm just going to fork that, take the token away, and just let people use it. So Uniswap ended up winning that battle of like, because it was a better experience for people. They didn't have to bother with tokens. Well, then the bubble reignited. And what did they do? They took VC money and they put a token on it. And then now everything has a token. So I think we're getting back to a point. Thank God the bubble popped, because it gives room for companies like Synonym and, TBD and whatever. Like, and there's a bunch of companies building this sort of decentralized stuff on Bitcoin and just adjacent to Bitcoin. And I think if the bear market continues over the next year or two or whatever, we will have actual, legitimate, real, decentralized web, legit protocol technology, not with any tokens, not with blockchains, that will solve problems for users. And hopefully that will win, because the token incentive, the perverse get paid to come gamble on my dApp thing, is dying off, I think. Anyways, it feels like it is, and it will even more over the next year. So it's a good time that you guys are like, you're ahead of Block's project. You guys are launched already, right? You have a couple of the projects already up.
I don't look at it that way, so I couldn't say as far as who's ahead or anything like that. I have heard they do intend to also release some kind of wallet. I do see how they've kind of they partnered with Circle, which feels a little bit like how we're partnered with Tether and these kinds of things. I don't know where they are with things. I've paid a lot less attention to it than I did when they
I think
first came
I think
around.
they're not going to be ready for like another 6 to 8 months for a demo, like a beta
Yeah.
project.
I have a feeling you'll see something sooner than that. I'd be surprised if they take that long, but in the end, I don't really care. And I'll give you maybe a little bit of a reason why. In that, first of all, I just can't because like we have to do our own thing, and we're already confident that the design decisions that we've made are preferable, at least to our theory of how things will play out. And so we just don't have the same approach. And another thing is like how you mentioned, like the bear market, how it may affect shitcoinery and the what you're alluding to in basically like a narrative war. I think that that narrative war is still going to be difficult next bull market, and that like shitcoiners aren't going to stop trying, right? They're going to come up with new creative narrative. They're highly incentivized to come up with very, tricky narratives, and they will have them, and they will have them again, and maybe they'll have evolved beyond Web3 to something else. I don't know. I don't care. But those narrative wars are a narrative war over exploiting the ignorance of new entrants and really even current entrants, because a lot of the stuff we're all doing is pretty technical and pretty complicated, and even when it's not technical, it's hard to explain, it's hard to like just understand. Like talking about like identity, or abstracting endpoints to keys and DIDs, and all these things are confusing for people. And what one philosophy we have that's different from what maybe Web5 is doing is, I think that the choice to call it Web 5 and the choice, in my opinion, which is unnecessary, to actually attach it to Bitcoin is still a remnant of that kind of narrative. In other words, that kind of shitcoinery approach where we take advantage of the affinity of blockchain and say we've solved the problem with blockchain, and that kind of gives people some kind of loose feeling that they may make money off of this, or that blockchain actually does more than something than just for Bitcoin. Um, and then calling it Web 5 as if it's actually a version of the web that everybody is, going to have to use through some sort of, authoritative specification, and their actual intent and style of using authoritative specifications to express their designs, like W3C submissions, this kind of thing. That means that now we're going to be arguing with each other. And so I'm going to have to, imagine you're a new person coming in. You've got shitcoiners telling you that you can buy this token and get rich if you use their web design, their web
Mm-hmm.
solution. You've got Bitcoiners telling you you can use a Bitcoin solution. And you've got other Bitcoiners telling you you don't need Bitcoin for that and using another solution. And they're all trying to explain to you the differences. And you're
Right.
like, all these people are just confusing me, and they're all probably lying to me, and all you're going to care about, hopefully in the end, is what problem you're trying to solve. If
Right.
the problem they're trying to solve is get rich fast, you don't care what I'm going to say. If the
Yeah.
problem you're trying to solve is you actually want a self-sovereign web, then you have to now decipher the difference between the people competing in that area. That will always be true, I guess, but I do kind of wish that like there were more people. Like we really like competition, and we try to think of ourselves as like a reference or a example implementation of these solutions, and we want other people to put slash tags in their wallets and compete with our wallet. We want other people to use our Blocktank LSP server and run their own LSP. We work with other LSPs to create specs, to bring that market alive.
Right.
It's not. I know there will be competition. I just would like it to be the most sincere and consumer benefiting style.
Well, dude, like I think I kind of look at it a little differently because I'm not as much of a technologist as you are, so I'm not in the trenches of this. I'm more of like a narrative sentiment machine, I guess, and I'm like taking the pulse of what's happening across everything. I spend way more time in shitcoin communities and DeFi and like trying to identify who are the actual cypherpunks versus who are the charlatans in crypto. Because we had like something like 10 to 20 million people come into crypto funnels this year, this last bubble. And not all of them are unethical grifters. Like most of them turned out to be like the significant majority of people turned out to get corrupted by the siren song of easy money token pre-sales and dumping that on plebs and oh, it's liquidity, it's decentralized markets, whatever. But there's a bunch of people that came in that actually were technologists and they're actually trying to build something. So I I look at it like two different sort of ways. There's what you guys are doing with Synonym is perfect for tech agnostic people. People like say Moxie from Signal or whatever, like he went in and did a deep dive exploration of Web3, NFTs, DeFi identities and stuff, and found it was just a big mess of surveillance and censorship.
And then he made a shitcoin.
And then he made a shitcoin. But like he said that he would totally be willing to integrate with Bitcoin or to use decentralized technology if it solves a problem and if it's easy to use. So like people that are against Bitcoin but are cypherpunks and against shitcoins but they are cypherpunks and they actually want to see a decentralized web. I think what you are doing is amazing for that because you don't have any connection to the Bitcoin blockchain at all unless it's like, people building apps that interact with it. And that
Right.
solves a big problem for a lot of people who are not yet ready to like confront their cognitive dissonance around Bitcoin or whatever it is. But then what Jack and those guys are doing is directly competing with Web3. Like they're in the trenches with Silicon Valley VCs and they're like having meetings with, at dinner parties with VCs and stuff, like explaining to them, like, you can do this on Bitcoin. You don't need to have a shitcoin. So I think it's like we're all kind of working together to kind of combat the worst possible scenario would be Andreessen Horowitz wins. That would be the worst possible scenario.
Sure. I don't actually disagree with anything you're saying. I just added a little more nuance, as far I have to. Like we
Yeah.
are separate from that, and so I
Yeah.
have to be able to understand and explain why we're separate from that, why we are not Web5. And I think some of the nuances, yeah, maybe they are competing more directly with Web3 than we are, and more directly both geographically and culturally with it than we are. And maybe I also think you're right in that we're trying to be as abstracted or blockchain agnostic or just blockchain ignoring when it comes to things like slash tags, and it only matters how you combine it with Bitcoin, if you combine it with Bitcoin. But the nuance there again is like you're still making it seem like the competition is among blockchains. And it's just not true in my opinion. And then you end up, and I think that such impure incentives do corrupt inevitably. And so by trying to compete directly with Web3 on their turf, you are going to end up doing things like partnering with Circle.
Right.
Like I could never do that. Now, granted, we are technically owned by Tether, but Tether doesn't. They're the money. They don't. We're related to them because I want to show. I do have plans for how to demonstrate the proper way to do tokens or credit more appropriately, and I think that having Tether be on that system is going to be a great way to bootstrap it. But we're not like partnered with Tether, we're not, and I don't know what, it's really odd to me to see that happen as well. Like why did they have to partner with
Circle.
USDC?
So the
With
way I
Circle,
look at
yeah.
the way I look at that is I was a little bit taken aback by two things that they
Or
were
other things.
doing.
I think they deleted them since, but they had this like little series of partnership announcements that were like shitcoiny things, and there was no actual launches of anything. It's just like we are partnered with blah 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 and
Yeah,
blah
it's
blah
like they're
blah.
joining councils and things like that to kind
Yeah.
of, and some people look like, so I was definitely initially resistant to the concept of Web 5 and I kind of knew what they're doing. They're fighting back with in mimetic warfare in a way, but then recently they issued like this trademark or something on the Web 5 term because Craig Wright and BSV people were actually claiming that they were doing Web 5 and it was just like they felt like they had to protect people from getting scammed, but then there was massive pushback against that from Bitcoiners and the Web3 community. We're like, oh, this is already going down a path of like centralization. So they abandoned those plans, I think, and now they're just gonna like
Well,
not try to
let me
trademark
tell
it.
you a cool thing about slash tags. It's a generic term, so we can't patent it. We can't trademark
Right.
it. It's a
Web
pre-existing generic
5,
term.
like Web 5 to me is kind of dumb. I think that the term that they're trying to make happen, it's like fetch, from that movie, is like, don't try to make fetch happen. Like, I don't think they actually will make Web 5 a thing. I think it's just like a battle. But when you talk to them, they actually believe, like, they actually are serious about that term. I don't know. I think it's a dumb term, but I love what they're building. I think what they're building is really good. And it's a different strategy to approach peer-to-peer web and decentralized IDs and stuff than you're taking and that other people are taking. Like, there's other people working with Lightning
There is
Network,
admittedly a lot of overlap. Like, it's different, but like there's a lot of overlap.
but
And so
they have the distribution and of like millions of merchants and tens of millions of customers in the US. And so they have to do regulatory compliant activities. What they're trying to do, in my opinion, is build a decentralized protocol for exchange of value, and then build the first application on top of it, which is Cash App being able to send stablecoins. So they're going to work with Circle because they're a U.S. public company and they have to work with regulated entities. But the spec, I think, will be
to
able to be
be clear,
used by
Tether is
anybody.
a regulated entity.
Not in the U.S. though, is it?
Well, they're not a U.S. entity.
Right, but like Circle is. So like Cash App's building something for U.S. customers. So
Well, what I mean is
partnering with
Coinbase
Circle.
supports Tether, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I think like they're probably going to support Tether too. I don't see why they wouldn't support Tether.
Yeah.
I just think it's because Circle is a US, you
My
know.
guess is there's something we don't know going on. Like, for example, Circle will probably be issuing on Taro, and Web5
Yes,
wants
they
to
will be.
combine with Taro, and it's a whole like Americanized version of
Yeah,
everything.
which
Yeah.
is good in a way, but then also we need interoperability with what you're building, and even with Solana and Ethereum and all that stuff. Like, there's stable coins that the number one use case for blockchain shit like that emerged over the last 2-3 years, aside from Bitcoin being used as a savings vehicle, is stable coins being used by people overseas to escape their massively inflating fiat currencies. And a lot of people, I'm an investor in Bitnob, and close friends. Well, I'm good friends with Ray from Yusuf, so we're always talking, and I like to keep a pulse on what's happening with the method of exchange use case, whether it's Bitcoin or stablecoins. And look, there's like real adoption of stablecoins overseas, and thankfully, it's Tether is the number one stablecoin that's being used, but unfortunately, it's like on Tron and Ethereum and Solana and stuff like that. So I do think that if we want to reconcile, like, back to the moral, sort of ethical, decentralized web stuff, we have to build bridges for letting people get back onto like Bitcoin through either Lightning Network through Taro or Liquid Network or whatever. And so I think that's the way things are going to go over the next couple of years. I don't know if you've thought about that much. Like, do you plan on having interoperability with, like, allowing people to build bridges into the tech stack
So
that you're working on?
when you're actually making decentralized stuff or peer-to-peer stuff, there's no concept of whether we will allow someone to do something. They just have to choose to do it. And you also have to be careful with this concept of quote unquote interoperability. Um, Often people will conflate the term with open source. In other words, I made a thing that anybody could use, but doesn't necessarily work with everything. And even if you want to use it, it may not work with your thing without a great deal of work. And so I would say it's a red flag when people are focusing on or really pitching, the concept of interoperability for something new. Um, DIDs are not interoperable with anything. They're not even implemented on anything, as far as I know. And so to call them interoperable is not a lie. It's just a misrepresentation. Like, it's not accurate.
How
Um,
would that work, say it with a DID, like a slash tag and then an ion identity, like a TBD identity? Like, would you be able to have those things translate to the other networks, or would it not
could it
work?
be made possible? Yes. Will it be that way out of the box? No way. And that will be true of every single different key-based identity system, even ones that both support DID. The issue here is interoperability isn't just about whether or not you follow a spec. It's whether or not you use the same tech stack. It's what your dependencies are. It's what language you've programmed in, what language you've shipped the actual libraries in for the applications, and you end up with like all these like dependencies that are not actually interoperable. And so you're going to end up like, for example, like slash tags right now, we've implemented it in React Native, and its dependencies are Node.js. And if you want to try to use this in some other systems, you can. Now, that's not because it's not quote unquote interoperable. It's because you have to do a whole bunch of work to kind of convert all this stuff into a format that works with whatever format you chose on a code level. And so interoperability is really tricky. It's all open. It's all open source. Anybody could follow the spec. But as far as like specifically comparing slash tags to Ion and DID as a format for that, the way to think of it is we could support DID format within the slash tags format. Ion could support, or say Ion supporting apps could also support slash tags and the kind of slash tags profiles, which is kind of how we handle the DID kind of aspect. But the way we handle it is just, we don't say, here is how you must form the data. We say, you must have a place to point the data to, and that's it. And so slash tags in its root is just a key that has a hypercore drive associated with it. That's it.
So, okay,
And so
let's talk a little bit more about the hypercore thing, because you've mentioned hypercore a couple times now, and I don't really even know what hypercore is. I'm sure the people watching and listening have no clue what hypercore is. So can you explain back to basics, like what is hypercore and how is that able to like disconnect you from blockchains?
sure. So hypercore is the closest kind of way to start thinking about it. People have some familiarity with is like BitTorrent. And so if you've used BitTorrent before, you'll get some of these concepts a little bit better. But BitTorrent is like this DHT network where different
What's
seeders and
DHT mean?
distributed hash table. And
Okay.
so the way the network works is it keeps this hash table, this record, this database of just how to find data. And then when you are looking for the data, you will find, as you drill down, all of the different peers that have that data. And when you've established a list of all the peers that have that data, you start downloading that data from all of them. And so you don't care, it doesn't care who made the data so much as who has that data. And so a hypercore or a hyperdrive is basically a virtual drive, like you put files in it, that where it's identified by a pub key. And so you use the DHT to find. So say you want to find my profile, John, and I tell you, hey, my profile is this pub key. And so what you do is you use hypercore, you go to the network and say, who has this pub key? And there's a process for helping you drill down all of the peers that have the file for that pub key. And so now you may find that there's only one. It might be my computer, and you start downloading the drive from me. And you're essentially following that drive. You're just subscribing to it, like almost like a social media profile. But you may find 20 people have a copy of that drive, or 5 of them only have half the drive, and 5 of them have all of it. And you get all the pieces from however it comes the fastest to you. And so you are like a leecher, and they are seeders. And like kind of like when you download torrent files of movies using BitTorrent or the Pirate Bay, this kind of thing. The Pirate Bay, all the files on there are based on BitTorrent, and they use a DHT to establish these things. What's unique comparing hypercore to a blockchain and comparing hypercore to BitTorrent itself is that the files in BitTorrent are not key-based, and the files in hypercore are also they're a Merkleized structure, and so they're an append-only log, and so they basically operate just like a blockchain, except they have one owner, and there's no mining. It's all of the procedural parts of a blockchain. In other words, there's a sequence, and you can only add to that sequence. And if you break the sequence, you fork the database. So it has that kind of aspect of quality. But it's like if blockchains were a database. And so when I want to make a new hyperdrive, I have a key. Only the person who has that key can write to that drive, and I can only add to that drive. So anybody who's aware of that drive can keep a copy, and they can watch the integrity of that drive, just like a Bitcoin node can watch the integrity of the blockchain. So there's no consensus other than that. The way that it works is, if I try to change the history, it changes the actual header of the file and it forks it. And so if you're following, a file that you intend to have integrity of the whole history of it, the sequence of it, and then I try to change history, then now it's a new blockchain. And so you won't follow that one unless there's some reason you actually want to. And that might be, I say, hey, I've deprecated this drive, and you trust that whoever told you I deprecated it, it's true. So now follow this one. There's all kinds of use cases that you can employ here. But the point is, anything that you may think you could do with a blockchain could be replaced by this primitive. And so
Okay.
and now, so slash tags is basically the kind of layer on top of this for how you associate the data and how you apply it within systems. So like having, social media profiles that are portable that you could use in any system, or having contacts, or having, you could use these drives as data feeds. And another unique part of this compared to BitTorrent is you can append them. In BitTorrent, when you look for these peers and you look for a file, if you can't like change it. The only way you find it is if everybody has the same file. You can't add more files to it. With hyperdrives, you can add more files to it, and so they become data streams. And this is how Keat works. And so Keat uses hypercore as a underlying technology for what it's doing, to basically create live video feeds and live chat, chat rooms and chats to do so. The Hole Punch, which is like a sister company within the companies of Tether, Bitfinex, and Synonym, they kind of specialize in the live communications aspect of what you can do with hypercore, and we specialize, in how to apply these things for identity and for, metadata, reputation, all of the other stuff that you might want to do in a decentralized web situation.
So if this is append only, and it sounds like it's not actually like IPFS, where IPFS is storing files like that you would, use as a decentralized web server or whatever, where you can add and remove files. Is this more just like a relationship database and the file data is stored somewhere else, or does the streaming video data actually like sit in a hyperdrive somewhere?
It's actually the data. There's no referral aspect. It's not a relay. It's like, who has this data, and you can delete files. You simply purge it from the history. So in other words, hopefully this isn't too technical, but yes, it is append only, but you can still add and remove files, in the sense that all you have to do is actually delete that data on your computer if you want to delete a file. Now, you're not that you still keep the proofs, in other words, the integrity of the sequence. You just don't serve those blocks anymore, because you don't have those blocks anymore. So it's like, imagine like you were serving the Bitcoin blockchain, and you just say, oh, I don't have blocks 5 through 100, get them from someone else,
Like
because
Ripple.
you deleted them. It doesn't mean that your copy of the blockchain is wrong. It's just incomplete. And so you
Okay.
haven't forked anything, you just don't have all the data.
So
And
is this like DHT structure, hypercore? Is it one big giant database, or is it a bunch of forks that you're only
Well,
looking at specific
the
forks?
DHT graph itself it's not one database, because obviously there's no central server. Everybody, but it is a graph, and so people can add things to the graph, and they choose which things they keep in their graph.
So
But
it's one sort of like one graph that your client will only pay attention
sort
to
of more like a
pieces of it.
phone book, basically. So, and then there's an indexing aspect of how you could drill down to find peers that have what you're looking for, but there's no central database, and there's no global anything. ask, it's all relative to whoever you ask and whatever they happen to have. And so you don't have to keep everything. So like, for example, like in Ion, using Bitcoin as a database, you have to parse, the entire history since Ion existed, at least, to find all of the proofs related to any key rolling or something like that. And so you have to basically parse the Bitcoin blockchain to effectively, make sure what's going on with Ion. With what we're doing, you just only have to know what you're looking for. And so if I am trying to figure out like what the latest data is for John, I go to John's pub key and I ask it. And we have different cryptographic schemes for having like a master key or multiple devices and things like this. But the data is always owned by a key and thus owned by an individual.
Interesting. Okay. So like most people are not going to actually download the entire data set, right? They're just going to look at what's
Oh, no
relevant to
way.
them and then just store maybe
It's
a
more like
couple
following
gigabytes.
somebody on Twitter. Like you don't download all of the tweets on Twitter, right? When you when
Right.
you when you open the Twitter
So
website, you own
who's going to be keeping this DHT graph, like the hyper drives? Who's going to be maintaining it?
anybody who creates one, anybody who wants to run
But
a node.
is there like a node runner that that keeps the entire database? Is that
No,
ever going to
no, there's
exist?
nothing. That's the thing is like, and this is one of the differences between what we do and what Web5 does is they believe in global solutions. We do not believe in global solutions. We believe in relative or, uh, localized solutions. And so you would only know about and store what you care about, and vice versa. I would only, like, if I don't care about you, I'm not going to subscribe to your drive. I'm not going to keep a copy of your data. And
Right.
the cool thing about this, or another cool thing about this, think of it. Do you know what a CDN is? Like a content delivery network.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a cloud, but people use it to power their applications. Like it's the data for their applications. That's kind of more like a way to think about how we are applying hypercore. We're saying, okay, this is data. This is a cloud, except anybody can host anybody's data, and
Right.
they can't change the data.
But the data that, like, if I'm hosting your pictures, like it must be encrypted somehow,
They
or is
can
it
be, or
not?
they don't have to be. They can be totally not encrypted, or in other words, they're encrypted in the sense that I'm the only one that can write to the drive. And when I write to the drive, I could write encrypted data, and only the people who know how to decrypt that data could read it. But I could write it without encrypting it, and now you could host it too, and it could be
So
public. So,
you
say for
could
example,
you
let
could
me give
pay
you a
me to host
yes.
your data encrypted, and I could earn some sats if I wanted.
Or I could pay you to host my data not encrypted. In other words,
Right.
I could pay you to host my website, but my website is actually a hyperdrive, and I
Okay.
could have 50 nodes. I could pay 50 nodes to host that data, and when people go to visit my website or look up my key on the DHT, they just get it from whoever gives it to them the fastest and the cheapest. And none of the people hosting that data can manipulate that data because
And
they don't have the key.
so like that's hyper drives, and then hole punch is a protocol to be able to cut through, like to deliver the data that is stored in the drives
No,
between peers.
that's Hyperswarm. That's the DHT. So the actual DHT aspect of Hypercore. So Hypercore is the overarching name of all the things making up this stuff we're talking about, the protocol, the DHT, the drives, etc. And then you have various modules that make up the Hypercore concept. And so you have like Hyper Drives, Hyper Bees, Hyperswarm, and these are all things that power this. And so Hole Punch is, and you'd do much better to interview Hole Punch themselves as a company. The reason they named it Hole Punch is because there is a concept that to make this practical and reliable, you have to do a process called hole punching, and this is a way of breaking through networks to be able to deliver and download and send data. And so the hole punching is just it's something that they had to specialize and do a lot of work to make actually reliable and make sure that, like,
Okay.
no matter what network you're in, you're still able to participate in this network. That's why they called it that. But the Hole Punch company is creating something called the Hole Punch platform. And what the Hole Punch platform is a way of taking all these hypercore modules and making them easy to use. It's almost like, think of it kind of like as a SDK for Hypercore.
Right. Okay.
So
Oh,
you
that's
can use
cool.
this as a
So
platform to
anybody
create your
can
own
then build
applications.
a peer-to-peer app using
Right.
the whole punch stack and
Yeah. And so
the
Key
hypercore
is the
stack and whole
first application built using the whole punch platform, which uses Hypercore technology. And soon we'll also use slash tags.
And so
And
like
so
would this be the perfect stack to use to make a real decentralized VPN?
yes, and I believe that's something they plan to work on as well. But yeah, you kind of need it actually if you want to make sure you, because the thing about peer to peer is it's private in the sense that only the people that you try to connect with, or only the people you share your pub key with, can find you. But then you have to trust those people not to share that info with other people. So it's not private perfectly. And it also, when you say it's private, as in like Keat will say, never on a server. Okay, that's
Mhm.
true. But the problem is that there's still this aspect of, you are exposing your IP address to your peer. And depending on what you are trying to do, like say, for example, you're a cam girl, and a cam girl doesn't want the guys that are tipping her to know her IP address, because they might come knock on her door and
Right.
something bad could happen. And so a cam girl would not be advised to use Key to, do her work in its current state. And so you have to provide tools for people to now mask their IPs or relay their data in a way that kind of separates their IP from the user that's getting the data. And so you need VPN essentially, or VPN like concepts, to be able to make this more safe and more private. And so that is actually inevitable for this network as well.
Awesome. And so that is kind of like competitive or adjacent or whatever to like what Blocks is building with the decentralized web nodes, right? Like that's their solution for the serving of the data, is like building the decentralized web nodes, and then they have their form of like ion identities and stuff, and then I guess TBD is going to be a DEX that allows you to trade things.
Yeah, so I like slash tags is like a more abstracted, flexible version of Ion, and Hypercore. I don't know enough about DWN, but I'm gonna guess that same would be true. Hypercore is a more abstract, probably a more abstracted, flexible form of what they're trying to
Cool.
do with, because they're not using IPFS exactly. They're using like IPLD, or I don't know a lot about how they're doing the storage aspect, but they're not using a DHT as far as I know. And I think that the DHT is a really cool way to like remove the DNS dependency, to add a lot of uncensorability, and privacy aspects. This whole idea of being able to have anybody be able to host your data, I think it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. Is there anybody else in Bitcoin or even not within Bitcoin that is building anything similar that you would fit in the bucket of like people working on peer-to-peer web or D-web or whatever we want to end up calling this?
I don't know of anybody as similar as Web5 to what Synonym is doing, but there are tons of people doing things similar to pieces of what we're discussing today. Like there's a lot of different people making different kinds of DHTs, different kinds of identity systems, different kinds of ways to build dApps. It's a whole rabbit hole. It's like, if you think that Bitcoin and shitcoins are a rabbit hole, then you haven't seen the decentralized web rabbit hole. And that one's even harder to understand. And so there is a whole rabbit hole, and it's actually decades old. Tim Berners-Lee himself has solutions for stuff like this. He has a project called Solid, and it hasn't really taken off, but he has his own idea of how to solve this stuff. And so there's all kinds of projects in this realm. We're simply building on the stack. Like after our research, we're building on the stack that we think complements Bitcoiners the best and really has the best chance of succeeding. And again, in these kind of to not use the word, but interoperable ways, or at least agnostic ways. Like you mentioned earlier, like anybody could use slash tags. It doesn't matter which blockchain. In other words, an Ethereum wallet could use slash tags the same exact way that BitKit does if they wanted to. And
Because it just relies on public-private key pairs.
Yeah, or on
iMessages?
Hypercore, which is not a blockchain anyway. So, like the dependencies that we have nothing to do with what blockchain you like or how you want to pay people. PayPal
Right.
could use slash tags if they wanted to.
So
It's
MetaMask could integrate slash tags using the public-private key pairs as to sign messages, or like how would MetaMask
Well,
use?
MetaMask, I believe they support the way that realm handles it is they have a thing called Wallet Connect, and this is kind of their way of like logging into things and connecting to websites. But that's essentially their solution for having accounts. And slash tags is a similar kind of way to approach that. So the odds that MetaMask would ever support slash tags are low because the incentives there are to support things that bolster Ethereum and
Right.
bolster shitcoinery. And so the last thing they probably want is to show how you don't even need a blockchain for that.
Right.
But technically, it could like there are some like multi-coin wallets that now they have a different problem. They're like, okay, um, I have 50 different people trying to do ways to log in with their blockchain. What the hell am I going to do? And I already told you how interoperability, even when you try, is hard. And now they have no hope, right? Suppose they want to introduce some form of the social media profile or account using keys for accounts for websites or something like this into Exodus, for example, a popular multi-coin wallet. Suppose they want to do that. Well, they either have to pick one, and they'll probably pick the Ethereum one because it's the biggest one, or they can use something like slash tags, where if you do, now you can actually do really cool things like we do in BitKit. We have this kind of feature called slash pay or paying to contacts, where you can abstract all of the different payment methods to one pub key. And so in a slash drive or a hyperdrive paired with slash tags, we keep the data of what your supported payment methods are and how to retrieve the payment information. And so when BitKit, I can choose to pay a slash tag. So I can like add you as a contact. I can say, okay, I want to pay Brad. And I just tap on your face. And what the app does is it goes and looks at your current drive and it sees what payment methods you have. And it checks to see whether it can pay you with the payment methods that I have. And so imagine this in a multi-coin wallet. Now, a multi-coin wallet could be like, I'm John and I'm a shitcoiner now, and I have some Ethereum and I have some Tron, and you're Brad and you have some Tron and you have some, I don't know, Luna, and in the background, all the user sees is pay Brad and choose which thing you want to pay Brad with and how much. That's all they see. But in the background, it's checking to see if how to pay Brad, and it pays Brad in the way that Brad wants to be paid, and that basically mutually that the way that we both support. So it'll send you Tron, and it won't because I don't have Luna, I can't send you any Luna, and you don't have Ethereum, I can't send you Ethereum. So it will choose Tron and it will send the value that way. And so this is actually very useful for wallets that want to have many payment methods.
That's an interesting way to do it. Have you
You could do it
spoken
with credit
to?
cards and PayPal and anything. And so
Yeah.
in our realm, we're going to do it to be able to do Bitcoin, Lightning, HTLC channels, PTLC channels, paynims, Lightning addresses. There's tons of payment methods just in the Bitcoin realm alone, and we'll
Right.
abstract those to just one slash tag.
Oh, that's cool. Have you talked to the Exodus team yet about integrating this?
I haven't. I did. We did interact with them a bit back when I worked at Bitrefill to try to integrate gift cards there. I don't know if that ever happened, but I on our list of priorities, outreach to shitcoin wallets hasn't quite made it to the top of the plate.
I'm friendly with the both founders there. I could send
Yeah,
over
yeah.
an intro if you
I
want to see if
tell them to
maybe they
take a
would
look at
do
it.
it.
I'll tell you
Because
what.
they integrated
One thing I
Lightning
know about
Network.
them. Oh yeah, one thing I know about them is they do care about design, and I
Mhm.
think that if they take a look at BitKit, they'll see we care about design as well. So show them BitKit, show them what we're trying to do with slash tags, and that they could easily support that and be interoperable with BitKit and all these profiles that we're making. They could have the same thing, and so when I edit my profile in Exodus, it could mean that it updates my profile in miscellaneous shitcoin social media website XYZ, and in BitKit. And so, and the same, or Stacker News, it could be all the same profile that the user owns the data.
Have you talked to Fluffy Pony at all about his Yat and his decentralized DNS thing that he's doing there with Yat?
I haven't talked to him about it lately. I have known Fluffy Pony for a long time, but I don't know, the Yat thing is not really my cup of tea. Uh, it's like selling emoji domain names. The whole thing about selling domain names is it's kind of a scam. Not to be insulting, but to Fluffy, but like anybody can do it. So like if I want to buy, happy emoji, sad emoji dot, I don't know, fart emoji, whatever. Then from Fluffy Pony, Brad can go and make his own network and
Right.
same thing. And now there's 2 of those domains.
Well,
So the question is,
there's multiple emoji domain name systems going around on
right.
crypto, but the thing that I found interesting with what he's doing is they actually built like a interoperable DNS sort of thing that is supposed to kind of provide a similar use case of what you were just talking about with wallets, but I wonder if that could work, like if that could be powered by slash tags or something, because they're not actually, their mission is not to like be an NFT company. They're trying to just make it so that people can use an emoji to receive a payment on a Bitcoin wallet or on TikTok or on Twitter, or
Well, the
like they
thing
just
about
like
names, let's talk about names a little bit, because they're a very misunderstood concept. This actually, I was like watching some clips from like this like woke interview somebody was doing about gender identity, and I think that people arguing about gender identity could learn a lot from digital identity as well, and just the concept of a nickname or a domain name. And what the thing about names is, you don't get to decide your name. Names are mutual. Like we both have to agree on the name of something. And that is a primitive of when we're in talking about names. And so that means that you can't actually own a name. And the only way you can simulate owning a name is for there to be an authority of the names. In other words, you need a name space, and somebody has to manage that name space. And this is the whole scam that I'm alluding to with domain names, is that somebody has to run that network, somebody has to run that index. And so right now the popular one is ICANN, and everybody gravitates to the popular one because, one, they just think this is how it works. They don't know that anybody could be their own ICANN technically. Well, some people know, shitcoiners know, Stacks knows, and they sell .btc. But and or ENS and all these, there's a lot of people that try to be ICANN, but they're all just more ICANN. You know, the thing about slash tags and using hypercore as the data system for slash tags is it obsoletes domain names in the technical sense. In other words, no longer is a domain dependent on an IP address and a server. It's dependent on a key, and you own the key. You don't have to trust ICANN not to take your domain name away, or the feds to take your domain name away, because if they delete your website and your website is based on slash tags and hypercore, then you can spawn up your new website at any domain using the same key, and people will know it's the same website because they're not looking for the domain name, they're looking for the key. Names are a convenience. There's something, the only reason to use them is because you can memorize them and because they're human readable. They're not an actual, like, that's the feature of them. They're not a requirement in any way. We're using computers. Computers can render a name, and you can decide the name of things. So suppose I am key, 135B, blah, 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 blah. And you decide that key 135B is google.com. Now you can express this using slash tags in your own way in an application or in a browser or however you want. And when you are referring to that key, anytime you're interacting with that key, what it shows you is google.com in your browser. And you don't need ICANN to do that. You don't need to do that. You just need to know how you want to display it. Now, if that website wants that too, now you need some way of agreeing on this name, and you need somebody to index these names. And that's when you get into having an ICANN. And so all these primitives are important to understand, because anybody can run an index, literally anybody. And if you want to treat indexes as authorities, like ICANN does, like Stacks does for .btc, like ENS does for ETH names, etc., then fine. But you don't need that. You just don't need that. If you think of it like contacts, like in BitKit, we use slash tags as like a public profile, and we conflate this idea with the idea of like a phone contact. And so in your contacts list in BitKit, which is our Bitcoin wallet, we haven't really talked about it much yet, but when you add someone, all you're doing is you're following their key, you're following their hypercore drive, and their profile data, their contact data, is not entered by you; it's entered by them, and so they get to self-declare what their name is. And if you want to change their name, you can type it in, and you can change their name in your database. But that's the name you gave them, and they keep their name, but the key doesn't change. So no matter what you
Right.
call them, there's still that key. And no matter what they, no matter if they change their avatar or change their link list or their bio, it will automatically update when you look at it because you're subscribed to their data drive. And so
Cool.
you don't have to keep your contacts up to date. If I say I want to put my phone number inside of my profile, well, if I change my phone number, you'll see it immediately because you're subscribed to my data. That's the difference here. Is the whole concept of people thinking that domains are a requirement is a little bit of a misunderstanding about how DNS even works and how names even work functionally.
So in this paradigm of like decentralized contacts or decentralized websites or whatever, I bet so it would be that people would develop businesses around being the indexer, probably, where you would want to have a good
I'm saying you don't
reputation
actually
for.
need that, but that's what you would do if you wanted that.
But
What
like
I'm saying is you don't even need that.
if I wanna subscribe to all the websites, like I just would find the highest reputation indexer that has
Oh
like built
yeah, yeah, yeah.
me
For discover, so naming is a separate concept from discovery or
right,
search.
discovery, yeah.
Yeah, and so in order to discover something, you need somebody curating data. You need a way to either ask everybody for data that you know, and if you're looking for data that if nobody you know has the data, you need some authority to go to ask for them to retrieve the data. And so yeah, indexing is useful. I'm just saying that naming is not actually necessary,
Right,
because you can tell me what your name is in your drive,
right,
and now I have to know you exist, of course. That's the problem you're referring to now. But if I know you exist, I know what your name is, and I know what you want to be called. And if I don't like what you want to be called, I'll call you something else. And you don't even have to know that I'm calling you
right,
that. I can
yeah.
just say, "Oh, Brad's name is asshole now." And whenever and people
Pleased
do
to
this in
meet
their
you.
phone, right? Like when their stepmother is calling, they change it to like witch or something. Like
Yeah.
like people do this.
I don't do that.
Names are either names are local, they're relative, they're mutual, they're not authoritative.
So a friend of mine just asked, is this what IPFS and IPNS already does?
Well, I'm not an IPFS guy. I'm not an IPNS guy. You have to ask them what they do. I know a little bit about how it works, enough to know that I prefer, fundamental design aspects of hypercore and slash tags more. That's why we're making these things and building with these things. From what I know about IPFS, the way they handle data is a little unreasonable, and I like they're doing like this sharding stuff and pinning and these kinds of things, and I don't know that that's the best way to handle decentralized web solutions. As far as IPNS, I actually don't know anything about it at all. My guess is it's just DNS for IPFS, which you could do the same thing if you really wanted to with hypercore. But DNS as a protocol is already decentralized. Like protocols as a concept are decentralized. The question is like, do you really want like who are you going to use for DNS? Like right now, most people like they'll use Google or something to say, "Hey Google, where do I find this domain name? Which server represents this? And then they go and find it. And there's this whole design for how DNS is drilled down to find the server you're looking for. But mostly it's extremely authoritative and centralized. And the same thing will express if everybody used any form of DNS, eventually it trends to this, because you need the most convenient way to have a naming system is for there to be one phone book. You don't want there to be 50 phone books that you have to check when you're looking for somebody's phone number, right?
Right. The best way that I heard IPFS described was that it's just a generic peer-to-peer content addressable storage and replication system with libp2p, I think is the protocol that it uses. And
Mhm.
that because I thought Filecoin was IPFS, I thought Filecoin was like the coin for IPFS, but it actually isn't. It's just a bolted on implementation of IPFS that puts a shitcoin on top.
Yeah.
And the protocol, the IPFS, is just a generic peer-to-peer protocol for like, finding content and replicating the content. I don't know anything really
Yeah.
about
Uh,
IPNS.
our developers that work with slash tags and work with hypercore would give you a much more detailed answer as to what they do, what they don't like, or what they, the details of IPFS. I'm just not the guy to ask about
Right.
IPFS stuff. Yeah.
So, okay, we'll kind of, this is great so far. I'm really understanding the basics of like what technologies are making this possible. Um, I kind of also, again, want to think about this from the perspective of a normal user. Like maybe in a few years, I really do believe that there's going to be 1 billion people coming onto Bitcoin by, the next 8 years or whatever. By 2030, is probably 1 billion people using Bitcoin in some way, either holding it or using the Lightning Network. And I would love
We're
to
going to need
see.
bigger blocks for that. I'm not
Well,
trying
I'd
to
love.
troll you, but if you think that's how fast it's going to happen, we're going to need bigger blocks.
You don't think we can get more?
I forget what the math is, but there's actual like mathematical limits as to how fast we can
Well,
onboard
I
people.
think I'm thinking more like because we're gonna have things like Fediment and Cashew and multi like BIP what is the BIP 80 or whatever, the one that allows you to like generate child seeds from one seed so that you can onboard your family kind of with one seed phrase.
So, as far as things like Fediment and such, Bitcoin Beach, Galoy, I
Even
don't
Liquid.
consider Liquid. That's a whole other
Yeah,
conversation.
Galloway
But
money, like community banking
I,
stuff. Like that's not sovereign, trustless, completely
right,
decentralized Bitcoin, but I
I don't
think it's
consider that to
a
be Bitcoin adoption. In other words, like custodial Bitcoin is just the old system, right? Like custody was what Bitcoin was trying to fix, right?
well, look, I think that things like slash tags that allow you to have reputation and trust in decentralized networks will actually help make it more like Bitcoin in the same sort of trust model. Because there are people that you trust in real life. Like
Oh,
my family
I think
trusts me. Like all my friends and family trust me and I'm a trustworthy guy. So if I have a Fediment instance or whatever, or like a Galloway community banking for the whole community of like 1,000 people, that will help us onboard more people into using Bitcoin without taking up block space.
yeah, there's a few things to unwind there, I guess, but I'll just say, yes, I think that slash tag's goal is to digitize trust and to give people tools to be able to make better decisions about who to trust and who to trust with what. That's definitely true. And so thus a world where slash tag succeeds and a world where Fediment succeeds, certainly people would be able to make better choices about who they would like to run their Fediment. But good intentions and reputation do not change the risk of trust. And so, a system where you're holding 1,000 people's Bitcoin and you are a trustworthy guy does not necessarily mean those people will not lose their Bitcoin. There, you might be a trustworthy guy who gets sick and doesn't manage the server properly, or somebody scams you, or you never know what will happen.
Right.
And the same way that I'm trying to show how the only thing you need a blockchain for is Bitcoin, and I'm being very extreme about that, and it's allowed us to design things like slash tags and and BitKit and the solutions that we have created. I want to apply that same method and extreme behavior to custody. And that's why BitKit is all self-custodial. There's a like LDK node inside of it. You hold your own slash tags keys. The drives that you make live in the phone, and you create them in the phone, and you own them in the phone.
Wait, BitKit is a Lightning node? No, it's not a Lightning node. It uses an
BitKit is a
LDK.
wallet. It's a keychain, basically, technically, but it's a wallet. And
How is it non-custodial if it doesn't run a node?
I'll use this as an opportunity to say I'm trying to make self-custodial happen, because non-custodial doesn't make sense. Somebody always has custody, right? But BitKit, more importantly, to answer your question, BitKit has Bitcoin, and so you have your Bitcoin seed, and from your Bitcoin seed, you can generate your Lightning node seed as well. And so BitKit, and you also use that seed to generate your master slash tags key. And so all of the keys in BitKit are derived from your Bitcoin seed. And so when you want to restore a BitKit wallet, you can literally restore everything, all the data, all the keys, all the data, all your accounts, all your widgets, all your contacts, everything. And the Lightning node is an LDK node, and so Lightning Development Kit, we've done an implementation, and so you have I guess you could say a light node, because it's not a routing node, it's an endpoint, but you have your own node where you can receive and send Lightning transactions. And so I'm not sure which part of that was surprising.
I didn't realize that we were already there. I didn't realize we were at the point where you could run a non-custodial or self-custodial Lightning node on a phone.
Well, we've been there for a while if you consider LND Mobile. The user experience of LND Mobile has different trade-offs, and that's why we don't use it. But LND Mobile has existed for some years. Breeze is a self-custodial wallet. Phoenix is a self-custodial wallet as well, as far as I know. Moon is like a pseudo self-custodial wallet. They do this like swapping mechanism for making sure you always get it, but there is some trust involved. But yeah, it existed for a while. Through LND Mobile. The trade-off with LND Mobile is it uses Neutrino, and it's very slow, and the user experience kind of ends up sucking for this reason.
Oh, okay. So like I remember like a few years ago or 2 years ago, Neutrino was being debated whether or not it should be included into Bitcoin Core, and that would allow you to run
I think that's a separate conversation, but in the end, in order to run it,
Neutrino's been deployed like separately outside of Bitcoin Core as the LN Mobile. What did you say it was?
LND Mobile.
LND Mobile.
Yeah. And so now LDK Mobile, or if you want to call it that, doesn't use Neutrino. It works differently, and because it works differently, it's just a better design, and thus it loads much faster. And so this is the problem. The problem with LND Mobile is if you don't open your app for 2 weeks, you can't use Lightning until you sync your node, and that can take like more than 20 minutes if you haven't opened your wallet in a long time. And so
Gotcha.
This is a really bad user experience, because typically like you only open your Lightning wallet when you actually want to pay someone. And if you only want to pay someone every once a week, you always have to sit there and wait to sync the node. And granted, it syncs a lot faster than a Bitcoin node, but it still can take 5 to 20 minutes depending on how long it's been since you opened it, and that sucks. And so even Breeze is now is working on other solutions. I don't know what's public or not public about them, but they have other ideas about the next evolution of Breeze to provide a better user experience. And so I think I don't know if they'll phase out or actually ever drop LND Mobile, but they'll at least add support for another thing in there to have a better UX. Yeah, BitKit from the start is using LDK, and so as soon as you open as soon as you like download and install BitKit, the first thing you do is create a key, and it creates all the keys for all this thing. And so immediately you have a Lightning node, you have slash tags keys, you have slash tags profile, you have a hyperdrive, you have your Bitcoin seed, you have full ability to do all the things all at once, and you own all the keys.
I have to check this out. I didn't know it was out yet. I'm gonna definitely be playing around with that, and so I can use this as my Lightning wallet as well
Well, it
as
is in beta, so there are bugs. Don't put all your money on
okay.
there. And there are some bugs that are definitely prominent, and so we should have most of it worked out within the next month or two. But most of it works, and you can definitely play with it. If you go to the /tags website, /tags.to, we have like this playground where you can use BitKit Wallet to interact with things to show how websites can use this. We have
Cool.
various websites that have already integrated stuff like LN Markets. You can make an account using your /tag
Oh,
profile, your
nice.
/tags key. You can make an account there. Starbacker.com has similar thing, and starbacker.com will actually import your profile from your /tag. And so if you want to like have a profile on Starbacker, which is like a social media website, you can actually import data from your hyperdrive into your account there.
Very
And
cool.
we have a bunch of other cool things we'll show. Like, I don't know, I guess you haven't used BitKit yet.
No, I haven't used BitKit, and
You should have.
yeah, I haven't used it yet. I mean, I'm still trying to set up my Lightning node, man. I got a Embassy Start 9 last year, and then they had an upgrade, so I had to get the upgrade kit. Now they have a power like problem, so they have another like case upgrade. So I got that. So finally, me and my daughter, she's 12 years old, we sat down, we put the Lightning node together, and we plugged it in, and that's where we left off. So next step is turning on the Lightning node and using it. And see, I'm
Well, I'll say this to you and your audience. A lot of what I'm trying to explain here in this interview will just immediately make a lot more sense if you just play with BitKit for a few minutes, for
yeah,
sure.
I'm gonna definitely
Yeah.
check it out. So in the next, say, like couple years, say I don't know, let's say the next wave of adoption happens in 2025. What do you hope to have as a use case for like popularized, or what would be the best app or use case for regular people that you'd like to see using your stack?
I think that I would like to see them no longer dependent on any of big tech. And so there's not really just one use case so much as all of the things that we depend on today, banks, Twitter, Facebook, Apple, as far as like Apple iCloud, Google Search, Google Drive, um, Google, any type of publishing, Medium, etc. I don't know what's popular these days, but any type of publishing and content, YouTube, all of these things can be replaced by the things we talked about today, and I hope to see
Amazing.
will be replaced in that amount of time.
And do you see this AI revolution that's happening right now playing with, or like setting back this movement of like decentralization?
It's emerging, so it's a little hard for me to confidently say. It might be. Hopefully, it won't be too embarrassing to watch my answer 5 years from now. But my answer is this at the moment, which is, um, it's undeniable that the AI stuff is interesting, and it's reaching a more and more interesting, spot the more time passes, and that does seem to be accelerating as well. So, like, I remember I remember when OpenAI was trying to like automate playing Dota, right? Like that was one of the first things they were doing. And then there was the first chat, and then we had these like image generators, and and then people started making really cool art with these image generators, and then we had people, making these like really cool avatars and self portraits, by generating from mixing the AI with their own images. And then we have the new latest Chat GPT that's been out that everybody's playing with, which is really interesting. Um, and so it's undeniable that it's going to play a role in ways. I think that we're going to have probably the same problem we have with big tech. We'll have like a big AI, and big AI may be, open AI or Google, who knows who it will be, but there'll probably be two or three players like there are in all big things. Um, and that will be the problem. I don't think the problem is AI is going to kill all the jobs or whatever. I think the problem is AI is going to like be the next degree of scary privacy problems and scary monopoly and scary control and scary censorship. And that's already evident. For example, like people in the last week or earlier, just like days ago, are showing like funny, cool things they did or very interesting things they did, like with Chat GPT, and then you go there yourself and you try to type the same command, and it doesn't work anymore. And so they're literally censoring what you can get out of their product, right?
Mm,
And that's scary, right? Because it means that they're controlling the narrative now. Like
right.
like 3 days ago, I did show me a tweet in the style of Bitcoin error log, and it did it. And it was not accurate, but it was like you could tell they were actually using my data to make a new tweet. It was like me complaining about accepting an unconfirmed transaction, and and so like it was real, like it really did its job, or it did its best. Today I tried it and it said I cannot generate blah blah blah, and it just can't do it anymore.
Oh, weird.
And so think about like that could be true for anything,
Well,
and not
actually,
only
like
that.
this is kind of like why I said what would set back decentralization, because the way that AI is being presented to us right now is through centralized entities like you're talking about, and it is being soft censored, but it's also like almost a honeypot of an interesting use case that distracts you from decentralized stuff. And if there
Well, the
was a
power of it
really
is just undeniable. So yeah, honeypot is great. There's so much honey there, and the honey is even filling and delicious at the moment.
yeah.
You can't deny it. Yeah.
So I think like maybe what would be really a really cool use case would be to decentralize the AI interfaces so that they actually live in decentralized networks. And in order to interact with them, maybe you need to install the, you have a slash tag that you can log into the website with. And the thing is actually like the software is actually run in these hypercore drives and all that stuff. So that it really could be a decentralized AI generation platform. The only way that you can truly access it is through decentralized technology, because OpenAI is going to censor everything.
Yeah, so you're partially stealing what was the rest of my answer.
Oh,
And so
sorry.
there was a flip side to what
I
to
thought you
where
were done.
I was leading up to basically. So
I'll
what
cut
happened a
this
couple
part
of days?
out. So, what do you
No,
think,
no, no,
John?
no. No, I think it's good that you're following along very, very appropriately. Um, so the what I was kind of working towards when I was answering is that, so in part I mentioned how my ability to get it to make tweets for me was now censored and gone. And then the one of the main slash tags devs on our team, he's been tweeting about AI stuff and saying like the semantic web is dead. And I don't know how much you know about the concept of semantic web, but it was this idea to give to have a specification and a way for websites to express what the metadata was about the data in their databases and in their websites, so it was interoperable, so people could better find data. And so part of and so we had a little debate in one of our calls, or one of our team calls, where he was saying, the semantic web is the equivalent of semantic web is dead, and blah blah blah. And I said, but look, man, like the problem is this is not it, even if they open source it, it still has to be centralized. And so because it's massive amounts of data and massive amounts of processing, and the only way you can do highly high throughput things is in a centralized way. This is just a physics problem, right? You can't like get the same performance out of 100 computers trying to coordinate a result from that you can from one computer that's 100 times powerful. It's just going to work better in a centralized way. But OpenAI is a for-profit business. It is no longer an open source project, and so we also have all this centralized censorship, controlling the narrative, et cetera. All these problems that come the same with big tech. It's just big AI. It's big tech all over again. And so that means that just like with big tech, as you were alluding to, just like with big tech, we need ways to take control ourselves. And so the whole problem that of semantic web, and which was kind of indirectly an inspiration for slash tags, like I started coming up with primitives of ideas for slash tags like 12 or 13 years ago because I wanted to design a way to kill Google. And I said, how would we kill Google? How would we not rely on Google? And the idea was basically to take what they have is the algorithm, the weighting, and to put it in the user's hands. And then I learned about things like web of trust, and now we have slash tags, and slash tags is all primitives to establish a multi-dimensional web of trust system. And so what that does is it takes semantics, like schemas, and gives people the ability to weight these things and then weight how people weight these things. And so it gives you all of the primitives to be the algorithm. So you take a perspective, you say, okay, I'm looking for this kind of data from these kinds of people of this kind of quality, of this kind of trust distance, etc. And then you filter the entire network view from only the aspects of the network you
That would be
actually pay
so
attention to.
amazing, dude. Like Facebook used to be awesome. I used to love using Facebook back 10 years ago when it was actually people that I cared about. I saw what they were saying and we could interact with each other. When Facebook switched to pages and they switched the algorithm to weight pages more and then actually switched it again to make it so that you could only get discovery if you paid, that totally destroyed Facebook's use case. And that led to the rise of Twitter because you can more customize. Like, I just want to follow people and see what they say. Initially,
And
it was
even
like
Twitter
Twitter
doesn't
sucked.
do it as much as they should. Like
Right.
Twitter could do a lot. Like if Elon plays his cards right, he could make my job really, really hard
Right.
because if even though it's trusted, if he does give you what he want and does his best to avoid censoring and avoid walled gardening, then there's no reason for people to leave anymore. And so if he's delicate with his censorship, if he's delicate with his centralization and monopoly, then he gets to keep it, truly. And so, uh, but the way you, in my theory, is the way you get to keep it is by letting everybody leave whenever they want to, and everybody thinks it's the opposite of that. They think, oh, if I open up the API to Twitter, people will just use something else. Well, sure. But if you do it better than everybody else because you're fucking Twitter and you know how to do it better than everybody else, then why would they leave?
Yeah, that would be so awesome if Twitter ran off of like slash tags and like web of trust for the following and identity part. Cause then you could just like take Bitcoin Twitter off somewhere else if you wanted, but you'd probably still go to Twitter because they're a big company and they're building a better experience and providing more value
Right.
than just talking to Bitcoiners would. But you could do that if you want. And you wouldn't
Right,
have to
right.
worry
And so
about
the
creating a
idea,
whole new
yeah,
social graph.
right. And so like I mentioned earlier, like with the primitives we're using, anybody could be hosting the data, right? And so Twitter is no longer, the walled garden owning all the data. They're just the service provider that provides you the best user experience for viewing the data. You
Oh,
know what I
that's
mean?
epic.
For
Yeah.
for parsing the data.
That's what Blue Sky was sort of trying to attempt to do with Jack Dorsey, was trying to encourage that. I don't think he's a part of it anymore once he left Twitter, but it seems like
I
he's
don't know. He
still
might be. It's definitely a Twitter project, but he might actually still be somehow connected to it. I don't know. But I will say that like our slash tags engineers have looked at what's called the AT protocol or AT protocol, the first thing that the Blue Sky group has shipped, and they think it's pretty cool. I
oh
don't
good.
know if we'll use it. Probably not, but it's not it's not impossible. There's a chance. We just haven't come to that stage in our vision yet where we're wanting to implement or decide what protocol to use for social media or whether to build our own, because
Right.
there's things like Noster, there's there's going to be a few. There'll be probably stuff through Web5. I'm sure they'll do something for a format for social media as well. And so there'll be options. In the end, we're more inclined to have an option that is like fully integrated with our dependencies. But at protocol does solve a lot of things in a lot of cool ways. But the problem there is, my answer will be a little bit out of date, but I'll answer it as if Elon hadn't bought Twitter yet. The problem is that Twitter itself has fiduciary duties to profit, right? And they'll never convert to using Blue Sky's products and Blue Sky's if they're truly open, because they'll lose control of their ability to have advertising, and they'll be too scared that people will leave, basically, and that somebody will be able to compete. Because like if they adopt Blue Sky and protocol, and then say Facebook does the same thing, now Facebook can try to steal Twitter users, and vice versa, and it becomes like a competition again.
Right.
Monopolies don't really like more
Yeah.
competition, right? So the incentives are not quite there. But Elon is a wild card, like maybe Elon doesn't give a shit. Maybe Elon doesn't care if he profits. Maybe he only needs to make enough to keep the lights on, and he'll let people, and he just cares about freedom of speech. Like, I don't know what he'll do,
I was wondering, like, we've been going for a while now. I do have one more kind of question that might take a few minutes to answer, so I'd like to just go there anyways. But
Sure.
thanks a lot for coming on so far, and I've learned so much more about slash tags. Like, I was excited about it before, but now I feel like I really understand it. Where before I was just like, this is awesome, this is cool, I love this concept, but how does it work? Now I kind of get how it works. So, the one thing that I was talking to Junseth actually recently about slash tags and Synonym and what TBD is doing. And, Junseth, he's typically like everything is a scam kind of guy, and you don't need to do that. Like, that's typically what he says about everything. But one thing he brought up that was kind of like I didn't know the answer to was the what if you lose your keys part? Like, then you lose your identity. And I'm sure you've thought of that. So like, what, on behalf of Junseth, like, that's stupid, John. What if you lose your keys?
Well, what if you lose your Bitcoin keys? Would be my first response. What happens, right? And how do you protect yourself from that, right? And you have certain ways that you can do that. For example, you can only put a certain amount of Bitcoin in a hot wallet and keep your savings outside of it. And so you can only use certain keys for certain data and certain keys for other data, right? And so you do have the ability to have a master key and sub keys, and you do have the ability to have keys that represent separate devices. So you can revoke keys as well. And so as long as people are actually using the system as it's designed, then you'll get outcomes that you would like to be able to get. And so, for example, say you have your slash tags on 2 phones and you lose one phone. Now, you're not going to lose your data, even because you can now, or nobody's going to steal your data, because you can decommission that phone the same way that you would. It basically works the same way as you would lose anything, right? Anything in technology. You lose your phone. If you aren't careful, people might steal some money from you. So if you lose your phone, if you aren't careful, people might post on Twitter as you. You know what I mean? And but you still have if you've used the system properly, like in other words, you're using a master key and your phone is not the master key, which is how we would, ship it for you. Now, other people could ship slash tags in shitty ways and do it wrong. Like, we can't control how people implement it or how people use it because it's open, right? But we are going to do. We're not like ignoring this problem, but in the end, like, freedom is responsibility. That's the difference. And if you want somebody else to hold your keys for you, you can always do that. And that's an option too. And if you don't trust yourself. But in the end, like, using a key-based system is like making the ownership physical. It's like saying, okay, all of this stuff is owned by this key. Like, you might as well call it a physical key if you want to, the seed. And if you lose that somehow, then you can't unlock the door anymore. That's all true. So the question becomes,
Okay, that's
can
cool.
we
So
give
you can do
people
like
to
multi-sig.
well, and honestly, the answer I gave you isn't good enough yet. There's still, I haven't addressed all of Junseth's
Okay.
problems yet. So additionally, it's like, what if I do lose everything, and I want people to know who the new me is, right? Well, how do you do that today? Like, you go on Facebook and you see your mom is posting like donkey porn, and you'd be like, that's unlike mom. Why is she posting donkey porn? And what do you do in that situation? You probably call your mom, or maybe you have a relationship with your mom on Telegram, and you answer on Telegram, and her response on Telegram is ha 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 ha, lol 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 lol, gotcha, fuck you, fuck your mom. and you're like, okay, maybe my mom's Telegram is hacked. What do I do? Like what do I do now?
Maybe she hasn't taken her pills today.
Yeah, right. Like, well, it depends on who your mom is, but yeah, let's assume your mom doesn't actually like donkey porn and would never actually swear at you, and you're like, okay, something's wrong here, right? And so you go and you call her or you visit her. And you say, hey, mom, what's going on? It looks like there's some strange posts on your Facebook, and when I tried to talk to you on Telegram today, you were acting like really crazy. What's going on? She says, oh, really? I haven't been on Telegram today. I haven't been on Facebook today. And you go, oh, well, mom, you got hacked. And so now what does mom do? Like, mom says, you help her diagnose where she gets hacked. Say it was her Gmail got hacked, and that's why. And so her Gmail connected to this and to that, and the hacker got all her Gmail stuff. And so now your mom has a decision to make. She can try to like retrieve those accounts through an authority. And that's the advantage of using an authority, right? Is they have the authority to let you prove to them somehow with multiple factors that you're the true owner, and then you fix all of your passwords. That's the part you can't do with this because there's no authority. You're the authority, right? And if you use authorities, then they can censor you, et cetera, right? So there are trade-offs for sure. But your mom could make a new Facebook page, for example, and now you know who your mom is, and you know what her new Facebook is, and you tell your friends, and she tells her friends, and there are mechanisms that they use that are out of band, or I would call it multiple factors. And so what we need to do is make sure we give people tools for migrating identities and for associating identities. And that's what Web of Trust is really good for. And so if you have a Web of Trust, so now let's say you don't actually have a good relationship with your mom. You only ever talk to her on Facebook, and you only ever talk to her on Telegram. And so you don't know how to check who your mom is. Well, if you have a web, what her new identity is or what happened. Well, if you have a Web of Trust, you can ask people that you trust that are close to her. You can say, hey, dad, have you talked to mom lately? You know what I mean? Because dad didn't get hacked. And then he says, oh, yeah, mom lost her phone, and now there's all kinds of porn on her website. This is her new key. You know what I mean? And so there's no magical solution. It's a physics problem. And so in this sense, Johnseth's skepticism, as you've role played, is correct, but it's not something that's unaddressable. And it's not something that any key-based identity system can address any better than what I've described. And so, yes, there are trade-offs, but the trade-off is you get to control everything, just like with Bitcoin. But there's actually a lot we can do to make that experience, usable, predictable, etc. But in the end, and this is actually a difference between what we do and what Web5 does with Ion. Ion makes an assumption. Their assumption is you will never lose your master key. I think that's a faulty assumption. I think I make the opposite assumption. I say if somebody loses a subkey, they're much more likely to have lost their master key than not, right? Because they're somebody who loses keys. And so now so in Ion system, they're going to say, well, if the person loses their key, then they can use their master key to key roll and tell you what their new key is. No problem. Use Bitcoin as a broadcast mechanism. They make it sound like it's magical and everything will work. But it doesn't work, because what if you lose your master key somehow? What if somebody robbed you and they stole, your actual handwritten seed somewhere or something, then what do you do? How do you get everybody to know that who your new identity is? And so I would rather address those problems and say, okay, when people lose a key, we should now be skeptical of their master key, and we should have multiple factors or multiple ways of reaching them so we can re-verify who they are now. And or even let them know that they've been hacked, And so the problem with a lot of decentralized web people is they think in a silo. They think, how can I only using my system solve my problems? But this isn't realistic. It's not an actual limitation. Like I said, if how can I only use Facebook to find out if my mom is hacked? Like, I just need Facebook to tell me. Like, there's no. So what I do is I leave Facebook. I go somewhere else and I use a different band, a different form of communication. And so I think that's a more practical way of approaching it. Sorry for the rant, but Johnseth is right, but he's also wrong. It's basically, he's right that it is not, you can't break the laws of physics, but he's wrong that you can't address these problems and still use this system.
Yeah, no, that was a good answer, and it definitely makes me even think of like more businesses you could build on top of a stack like this, where
Certainly.
you could
You
be
could
an
put slash
identity
tags
provider or
keys in
whatever.
Trezor, for example. Like there's if this becomes popular, you could have hardware wallets that are just for holding your identity, you're holding your account keys, your contact keys, your website keys, your hyperdrive keys. You could have backup services for your hyperdrives that are for your photos instead of iCloud, and they could be personal and private, and then it can be encrypted. And the thing is, when you use this system, you are incentivized to design it in a way that is much more private, much more resilient, much more secure, because you have all these risks if you don't. And
Right.
when you use a system that's centralized, you don't have those same risks. You outsource all those
Is
responsibilities.
there a way, because I could think of a situation where, let's say you're like a VIP, like you're a celebrity or something like that, and you're in this decentralized identity system. You want to have some sort of anonymity in the system, using your sub keys or whatever as an anonymous account, and you get hacked, you get targeted because you're a VIP person. Like, it would make sense if there was like a bespoke service, if there was a company that did multi-sig key holding verification of master keys for VIPs, but like didn't know what the sub keys and the master key was. If it was, is there a way to anonymize but still have a bridge to the real world where celebrity can use a service to help them be like multi-sig custodian of their identity online in this paradigm, but also have their privacy at the same time? Or is that kind of hard to
Yeah,
build?
I'm pretty sure. So in the next version of what we're doing with slash tags on the keychain level, so like there's like, in other words, you need to have a key derivation path for how you generate the keys for slash tags, and you need to have you need to be thoughtful about how you create and store them and organize them, and because of how you use them. And so it's not just like, you don't do the same thing as you do with Bitcoin, where you just spit out the next key on the curve, because these things need to be managed. You need to know what you're doing, and there are security issues and key derivation issues. So in the next version of what we're going to do, we have this upgrade that's called actually key pair, like the fruit. And the key pair upgrade is going to allow the concept of tweaking, and tweaking is essentially the concept of adding a topic to keys. So what it means is that I can make a key, and if I can attach like another bit of data to it that says this key is part of this group, and I can and every time I make a key, I can decide whether to make it part of that group, or I can make as many groups as I want, and I can make it, and I can, every time I make a key, I can decide which group to put it in. And this ends up being a primitive for solving things like having multiple devices that have their own data. So they have separate data, but they in separate keys, but they end up converging eventually, and having, being consistent. So I can have all of my slash tags contacts, say, in BitKit in one phone, and I can have all my slash tags, contacts be the same in Breeze in another phone, and they'll remain the same, but each phone is actually run by two different keys. And so because they're both generated from the same master key under the same topic, that now the system knows how to manage these and keep them in sync, even though they're separate, realities essentially. And
Cool.
so, and you can also use tweaking to incidentally associate keys. So now say I make, many keys using this tweak or this topic, and I put them all in one group. Now, if I tell you that tweak, I say, hey, Brad, if you ever want to find me, use this, look for this specific, it's almost like another pub key, you could say. It's a tweak. I say, look for this. So like if you go to like decentralized Twitter, like that, D-Twitter that Gazé has invented and exists 5 years from now, you say, oh, I wonder if John has an account. You don't have to know what key. You could just look for that tweak. You can say, is anybody on Twitter using this tweak? Oh yeah, some key you never heard of is that tweak. And then you know it's me. And you're the only one that knows it's me. Nobody else, only the people who know the tweak know it's me. And so
Okay.
you have this way of associating keys and separating keys. And so there's all kinds of cool cryptographic things you can do to silo and associate and synchronize across keys. And so when you combine tricks like that with like problems like you're saying, like, oh, now what if I want to do multi-sig? Well, I'm pretty sure, I'm not a cryptographer, but I'm pretty sure it could be addressed in any way that you would prefer.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem for 10 years down the road anyways.
Yeah, it's one of those champagne problems, a good problem to have.
All right, John. Well, I really appreciate the chat, and I'll tell John Seth to watch that last bit at least. And
Yeah, he'll probably say. I would say John Seth. If John Seth is skeptical, he should ask me, because
yeah.
I know that John Seth is very intelligent, but keeping up with the tech is very time consuming. And I remember I talked to him recently, like about some lightning stuff, and he had some misconceptions. I was like, "Nah, man, that's not really what's going on." Like, and it's hard because we're both skeptics, and I'm on a different timeline and journey than he is, and so I don't know what he doesn't know. He doesn't know what I don't know, and this makes interfacing take more time to do it properly. And I don't talk to him that much anymore. So I would say if he's ever wants to do I don't know what he's into now, Clubhouse. I'm guessing he's still
yeah,
his
he's
thing.
pretty much hanging
But
out
if
on
he ever
Clubhouse.
wants to have it out with me, I'm game anytime.
All right, I'll bring you on Clubhouse sometime. We'll have a big chat about it. 'Cause we brought Mike Brock on recently. I asked him
I'm
to
sure
come on
that
and
didn't
talk
go
to us.
well.
And it was like Wayne and John Seth were just like attacking him. Like it was just the wolf's den for sure. It was good though.
Yeah, I think Mike Brock's a little bit of a moron, but I guess that's why I'm not surprised he didn't do very well.
Well, he ended up doing good. I like Mike
Oh yeah,
Brock.
yeah.
He's like on Twitter. Mike Brock is playing devil's advocate a lot. Like he's trying to challenge the status quo of Bitcoiners.
I don't follow him closely enough to know that. Matter of fact, I recently blocked everybody on the
Oh,
Web5
did you?
team. So yeah,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
done. I'm done interacting with them.
All right. Well, how can people follow you? I'm sure people would like to try out your wallet. I know you've mentioned the URLs a lot here, but like where can people follow you and try out the wallet?
Sure. So you can follow me on Twitter. Bitcoin Error Log is my handle there, and it's also my handle on Telegram if you want to chat. And then for the company, we have a website. It's synonym.to. And then for each of the products, again, it's the same scheme. So Blocktank, which is our Lightning service provider project and product, is blocktank.to. /tags, if you want to check out the SDK or understand how it works and what the features are of it, or play with the playground there if you're a developer, is /tags.to. And then BitKit, if you want to join the beta and play with the wallet, which I really suggest you and all your listeners do, because even though it's not complete yet, I think that this whole interview just makes a lot more sense and is easier to grok if you actually just have this in your hands and play with it, because it kind of is self-explanatory. If you now that you know that all this stuff is just using keys and a DHT and these drives that you own the data for, you can kind of see how we don't bother the user with any of that information in the app. We just say, here's your profile, here's your contacts, here's your widgets. And that's one thing we didn't talk about as well, is like how we use data feeds to make widgets, and you should play with all that stuff. But yeah, bitkit.to for that.
Awesome. Well, look forward to chatting with you again sometime. I'd love to have you on in 6 months or something and chat some more about it.
Sure, happy to.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.